Hey folks, before we get started this week, just a little bit of a cold open for our viewers on YouTube. Unfortunately, we had some technical errors this week, and we don't have the video for this week's episode. However, the audio is very good quality. Unfortunately, you will not be able to see mine and Barry's smiling faces for this episode. My apologies for that. So with that said, let's get on with the episode. Welcome back to Positively Trek, everybody. I'm Dan Gunther, and with me for this final episode about Star Trek Con, Barry DeFord. Barry, how's it going?
I'm sad, actually, to see this one come to an end. As much as I'm happy to see it come to an end, it's been a wild and fun ride. This has been a really cool new medium, something that really excites me that Star Trek is venturing into this radio play kind of world. So, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I have lots of thoughts. We're going to, I'll kind of briefly lay out what we're talking about. So in this episode, we're talking about episode 9 of Star Trek Con, Eternity's Face, the final episode of this 9-part audio series. We're going to talk through that episode and our thoughts on it. And then after that, some final thoughts on the series as a whole, how we've liked it, all that sort of stuff. But then also stick around to the end for an interesting discussion about the status of Star Trek Con in the Star Trek universe and what the future might hold for audio dramas, thanks to a really cool Trek movie article that came out just a couple of days before we recorded this. So I think that's going to be a fun discussion.
Yes, very much so. I am very excited.
All right. Well, let's jump into episode 9. Like I said, it's called Eternity's Face. And on Ceti Alpha V, we've got the story kind of coming to a head here. We have this ship that has been built by the Alborians, the Venture. And as of now, the crew roster of this 4-person ship is Khan, Callie, one of the Alborians named Kamura, and Joachim. They're going to go on this ship, apparently. Now, we know how this all turns out, so no, that's not going to happen. and that's kind of one of the things I'm enjoying about this is like knowing that's who's on the ship right now. I'm like, okay, so what's going to happen? How's this all going to change?
Yeah, it is. Again, like a tragedy, you know how it's going to end because we know how this picks up in the Wrath of Khan. So it was, I guess that's the thing, is like there are no surprises in that respect. It's just interesting to see how the train crashed, right? We've seen the aftermath of the train crash. It's interesting to watch the cars fly around and see how it all comes down. And I think they did a good job of keeping the way in which it happened a little bit differently. You know, like I like the idea that the escape hatch couldn't be opened except from the inside, which added a lot more agency to the roster themselves, which I thought was good, because at first I was worried that, you know, since we have the reemergence of Ivan, and you called that one, so good job, Dan. The reemergence of Ivan, I thought he was just going to rip that hatch open and cause a ruckus, but I'm glad he couldn't. So that added a little bit to the story for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing this story has done really well, is just paint a picture. So, like, I don't know about you, but during this whole part, I'm with them in the cavern there. And I'm sure the picture is different probably in your head than it is in mine, but I can see the ship. I can see the people gathered around it. I can see all of this happening. I just have to keep calling out how amazing I think the sound design and production of this show is.
Well, and what I like is that they've taken this medium and they've added the same quality of effect that we would get visually just simply to the audio. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I really appreciated, especially Discovery Season 2, their audio producing was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. I loved the sounds and stuff like that. And so I really feel like they've kind of carried on from there, but now we're in something of a bit of a new frontier with the radio play. Just really quick, if anyone has ever been there, if you've ever been to the Canmore Caverns, the big cave system in Canmore, Alberta, if you look that up, those are my caves. That's what my caves look like. Just so anyone would know. A lot of stalagmitey with big pools and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. I've watched too much Star Trek. It's the Planet Hell set.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is not great.
Kind of gray, no.
Very smooth floors, yeah.
Yeah, weirdly smooth floors.
Yeah, almost like you could roll a camera dolly in there or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, quite easy.
I need to be more imaginative with my caves, especially when it's left up to my imagination, and that's what I produce.
I mean, at least it's still Star Trek, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then you step outside and it's like the Vasquez Rocks or something.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I've kind of organized this outline by the characters in this story. And I think there's kind of an interesting way we can discuss the story going by the various characters. And the first one I've put is someone I think deserves a character chunk of his own, even though he's not in this episode anymore, because off screen, Paolo is killed by Ivan. And Paolo is a character I have absolutely loved. And I'm going to say, when I was first listening to this, and that's made apparent that he was just killed off screen and we didn't see and all this stuff, I was kind of livid. I was pretty angry.
Yep, me too.
And yeah, so that anger, I will say, is tempered by how the episode goes, because I think Paolo has a bit of a legacy that kind of informs what happens throughout the story in a way that I wasn't expecting necessarily, but I think the story does honor him a bit by really kind of altering the outcome of what happens because of Paolo and what he represents. So yeah. I'm still not happy. Like, I still wanted more of the character, but the story honors him a bit more than I think I was initially giving it credit for.
In the world of storytelling, though, giving Paolo a ignominious death, right? A meaningless, crappy, just throwaway death actually kind of adds to the story a bit, I would say, as well, in the sense that, like, this is all coming apart and the people you love and who are good are going to die really crappy deaths. Like, just crappy, silly, stupid. Paolo is kind of our Ophelia, I would say, if we want to get into the Shakespeare and all those sorts of things. Someone with a great deal of potential and interest and intrigue and all of these really great things, put into a situation that he didn't ask for and dying off screen in just sort of a crappy way. Right? At least Ophelia kind of got a last mic drop on all of the people who kind of wronged her. Paolo gets none of that, but you're right. His mic drop comes later, in a lighter kind of sense. But yeah, I do think that it was a choice to make him die off screen. I would like to talk to Kirsten Beyer and David Mack, why they chose to do the off screen, just sort of, he what was it? We fought, he lost, or something is what Ivan basically says.
Yeah. We fought, he lost.
Yeah. Yeah. He's such a slimy guy. But anyways, giving him that kind of death, I think really, really does sort of hit home how this is all unraveling.
That's a good point. And yeah, Ceti Alpha V really is the meat grinder that takes all goodness and grinds it away to leave nothing but what we see in the Wrath of Khan, wrath and vengeance and just all these negative things, both physically with this group of people through people like Paolo and in the character of Khan that we'll see, as we get later into this list. I've put Khan and Callie further down the list because obviously that's going to be a bit of a bigger part of the story. So yeah, Paolo we will come back to because he plays a role in Ursula's story, who's the next person here. I really like Ursula in this episode, and she's kind of been set up that we think she's going to align with Ivan. We know before Ivan was exiled, she was kind of a little bit sympathetic to him. She was turning against Khan. And here we see when Ivan shows up, Ursula seems to be kind of aligned with him. She's a little put off by Paulo's death, but she's like, okay, I'll go with you. But we do get that little bit before she leaves, after Ivan leaves, and she remains behind for a second, and she has some words for Paulo that kind of tell us maybe there's something else there. And then that gets really paid off, and there's a scene where we're jumping around all over the place, but Ivan is confronting Khan, and Ursula yells out that basically letting Khan know what Ivan did to Paulo. And it was at that moment I was like, oh, she's letting Khan know that, like, there's just a tone in her voice when she says it, that she's like, oh, there's something else at play here. And I love that, the subtlety of that.
Yeah, she's an underrated character, I think, in some ways. Or I guess understated character is a better way of saying it, not underrated. She's understated. And I think that's important about Ursula, is she's very knowledgeable, both in her craft, right, as a doctor, but also in her ability to read Khan, read Ivan, and see who Paulo was, right? And I think she really did care for him a lot. Obviously the falling out between her and Mado is quite tragic in itself. But how Ursula kind of comes out of all of this, at first I could see her as a potential sidekick to Ivan, and to be that kind of, she's lost faith, she's lost her love, she's lost her child, everything's lost. She comes around in a really good way. And she does it in a sort of a subtle kind of, Ursula-ish way. Like, Ivan doesn't even clock that she's like, I'm coming for you, buddy. Like, but in her very quiet and subtle way. And I don't think, necessarily speaking, she was fully back on board with Khan even. Like, I think she knows, like, I forget what she said about it, but kind of like, we've made our peace or whatever. Like, she's like, whatever. Like, he's not perfect. He's not anything. He's just a man with ambitions, and I need to survive as best as I can. I thought, even with Joachim eventually getting off of the venture, I would have liked to have seen Ursula, or at least in my headcanon, see Ursula take a very high leadership role among the survivors. And I think that is kind of sort of the implication, I think, ultimately. But at the same time, I think, should she have taken on a stronger leadership role, I feel like people would have been in a better state of affairs when Kirk does finally return. So I think something bad must have to happen to her eventually as well. So
that's you mentioned Joachim coming off the venture. That's Ursula as well, insisting that Mado go on the venture.
Yeah.
Basically, that's her kind of price for helping Khan, for turning the tables on Ivan and helping him, is she insists that Mado go on the venture. And of course, I don't have a separate section for Joachim, but I think he's very much worth talking about as well. He's such the blind follower. Blind might not be the right word, but like, he's so dedicated to Khan and so in that cult of personality way that, Khan says, okay, Joachim, you're off the venture. You have to go lead our people. And he's like, yes, sir. Jumps off, and, that's...
My life is yours.
My life is yours, exactly. No question on that whatsoever. And I think that's very fitting with the Joachim we see in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And he even gets a little bit of a scene here like we see in Wrath of Khan, where he says to Khan, like, basically, consider this, like, you have a ship, you can go and forget about all of this. That's very similar to what he says in Wrath of Khan, right? When they steal the Reliant. He says, you have a ship, you have the means to go where you will. Why are we going after Kirk? And that's, he tasks me. That's where we get that whole speech, but So interesting parallels there. And he's true to his character, I think.
A little less bonk on the head as some of the others. I liked that little just it's like poetry, it rhymes. But outside of that, no, I do think that Ursula ultimately, and you kind of bring Joachim into how Ursula manages to kind of right the rift, between her and Meadow by giving Meadow a long, healthy and prosperous life, in that respect. So yeah, Ursula's a interesting character. I liked her a lot in this. One really quick thing is midway through this whole episode, it's weird hearing Marla suddenly try to sell you something in one of the ads.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
It's just like kind of just messed with my brain. Anyways, that was a fun little cameo she had coming. I know she's been in a few other ads and stuff like that too, but I was just like, not hearing her as one. I thought it was a recording at first, and I'm like, wait, why is she telling what? So yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of I haven't mentioned the advertising much because I know it's a complaint people have and that sort of thing. It's unfortunate that like this is why you can get this podcast and not have to pay for it. So like I'm not gonna fault them for the ads and stuff, but yeah, the Marla's voice did trick me a couple times, and it's disconcerting. I don't like it. I understand it, but I don't like it.
Exactly. Yeah. Just suddenly you're kind of cast into this weird, uncanny valley where she's not talking about living on Ceti Alpha V. She's trying to sell you something. It's just like
bizarre, absolutely bizarre.
Speaking of bizarre.
Yeah. So a little bit of a last thing with Ursula. I do also love that when she grabs Marla's phaser basically and shoots Ivan, she gets that line, "This is for Paolo." And I was driving down the road listening to this, and like no one else in the vehicle, but I cheered. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And hearing that old phaser sound too. As he's getting it, I did really appreciate that she at least put him down for a while, and I like that.
Yeah, definitely. And of course when she says, I don't know exactly how this works, I don't know if he's stunned or just killed, I was like, oh yeah, he's stunned, he'll be back.
Yeah, they'll be fighting soon.
So Ivan, I guess this is where we have to talk about this guy.
He's a good villain. You love to hate him.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
Completely unredeemable. Garbage human being.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in that way, he's a good representative of succumbing to that hate and fear, right?
Yeah.
And there's also something about him, going back to Ursula again, that like he can't even comprehend that his actions in killing Paolo would have caused her to react that way. Like, to him, might is everything. Strength is everything. We fought. He lost. That's the end of it for him. Mm-hmm. But, like, he doesn't comprehend that. It's a complete lack of empathy, 100%. And he just can't comprehend that would make someone turn against him. He's like, he's the strongest. Why would she should follow me now? Not like, you killed my friend, you SOB. Like, yeah, he just doesn't get that, which is a fascinating thing about characters like that I cannot wrap my mind around.
Well, it's about taking joy in that pain. Like you said, true evil is a lack of empathy. Like, to get a little political here and to rip some things out of the headlines, there was a thing I saw just recently. There was a Hispanic family. I don't know where in the States this happened. I think it was in Illinois. They were driving. ICE agents were passing. Their vehicle was passing a Hispanic family's vehicle, and they were leaving like a Home Depot or something. And these ICE agents saw that the windows were unrolled on the family side, and they just sprayed pepper spray into their car. And they pepper sprayed the mom, the dad, and their little 1-year-old girl in the back of the vehicle as they just drove by. And I guess you see that level of literally taking joy in the pain of others, getting some kind of reward internally from proving that you're the big tough one, you're the big you're the one in charge, all that sort of stuff. And, you see that in the worst of people, sadly. And I think we're all obviously prone to doing things like that if we're not properly conditioned. And I think that's ultimately it is, how are we conditioned? How are we raised? How are we, how are our values reinforced? And, Khan says to Ivan, I failed you. And to some degree, he's created him, right? He's made him into the man he is by how he utilized him, and thus conditioned Ivan into this state of being. Because what Khan would have had to do to take over that much of the planet, Earth that is, Ivan's behavior would have been necessary in a lot of ways. And so, Ivan's irredeemability is kind of the responsibility of the leaders who cajole that kind of behavior. And obviously I'm making a statement here about what we see on social media, what we see in our public life, and hate's baggage. Hate can turn us in these horrible directions. And if we allow that hate to permeate our behavior, Ivan is what we become in one way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be necessarily physical. There's other ways to do violence, but when you start taking joy in that, and obviously they also talk Marla, Lear, who brings up Cortez. It was Marla.
Marla, yeah.
Marla brings up Cortez. And I think that's it, is Cortez is a perfect, embodiment of that kind of behavior, right? If you think about Spain in that period of time, this is a little under a century after Spain expelled all of the Muslims and Jews from their country, right? In a horrible mass pogrom where 300,000 people were forced away from their homes. 300,000. This is just after the end of the Middle Ages, right? And what does Spain get for it? Their entire economy collapses, and they have to Hail Mary throw Christopher Columbus across the Atlantic. And when he gets there, he's helped by a group of people who he then immediately enslaves. Yeah. And tortures and cuts their noses off when they don't bring him enough silver and all this sort of stuff. These people helped him. So this is what we create when we allow hatred, when we allow that lack of empathy to encompass our better judgment, encompass our perspective. And it's very easy to fall into that. So Ivan is a great distillation of that. And he's a character you just love to hate because he is hate.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up Cortez, because we're going to come back to him in an interesting way later in the story with Khan. But with Ivan, so absolutely agree with everything you said there. We, of course, have to have the final climactic battle between Khan and Ivan. And I do like how it plays out initially, where Ivan rallies everybody and challenges Khan, and Khan kind of is like, yep, you got me. What are you going to do now? What's next? And kind of, this is where Ursula kind of, I think, lets Khan know she's on his side, and in a subtle way, and things eventually turn and all of that sort of stuff. And of course we get that big final fight between Khan and Ivan, which again, I think Khan gives every chance to Ivan. Like there's like all of these, like you said, that we're handing him plot armor, but he's smacking it away, right? Like he's just absolutely determined to go down this path. And now there is one more call forward, I guess, to the Wrath of Khan that we've kind of railed against in previous episodes. The Khan scream, the I have been and always shall be your friend thing, which was completely unearned, I think. But I kind of like this one, where like the ship is about to take off, the cavern's going to be destroyed, and Ivan kind of looks like he's going to get away. And you've got Khan's line, "No, you can't get away," which is what he says when he's looking at the view screen as the Enterprise slowly pulls away from the Reliant.
Oh, wow. I didn't catch that one.
I actually really like that one, because he's that was reliving this in Wrath of Khan. Now, when I watch that movie, I'll be like, he's thinking about Ivan this whole time.
Wow.
Not realizing that he's the Ivan, not the other way around.
Right? Yeah. Wow. Good catch, Dan. Holy cow. Well done. That was, wow.
I actually really like that one. I can't even fault them for that one.
No. Well, I was so in the story at that point. I didn't catch that. Cool.
But so Ivan does bite it finally, and Khan escapes with his people, and the ship takes off. And everyone lives happily ever after, right?
Sure
right?
thing. Yep. Everyone's good. It's all good. We're fine here. How are you? Situation normal.
So this is, Khan gets back on the ship. They're going to leave and stuff. And this is where Khan has a moment. And I love this. Callie is listening to these recordings of Marla. And it's the Cortez thing that was brought up before. And she's talking about how, the true nature of Cortez and why he did what he did, and how it was ultimately self-serving and selfish and not for his people. And this finally gets through to Khan, and he has a moment where he realizes what he's doing and makes the sacrifice to go and lead his people through the hardships that they're going to face. This is the moment that I think this series hangs on, and Tuvok talks about it at the end as well, where this was the moment where everything was possible for Khan. He has pushed through his base instincts, his programming, and come out the other side truly evolved, more self-sacrificing and giving of himself. And for me, it made me think of a moment from All Good Things. And this is a little bit of a stretch here, but it's that scene at the very end with Picard and Q in the courtroom. And he said, and that was the moment that everything changed. And Picard's like, when I realized the paradox. For that brief instant, you were open to possibilities that you had never imagined before. And that's what I'm thinking. Khan has this moment. He is open to possibilities that he had never imagined before. He can become that good person that he himself sees himself as, I'm sure, but could become that truly good self-sacrificial person. Now, we'll talk about what happens and how that's completely undone because, as you say, this is a tragedy. Yep. But I loved that moment, and I loved Tuvok's reading of that moment later when he's talking to Dr. Lear as well. Yeah,
I think that also nothing makes a person realize the importance of things than to have a child. And, Dan, you and I aren't parents. Neither of us have children of our own, specifically. But I think you and I can still understand that. I always think of a dear friend of mine when I went to see his daughter. His daughter's almost 15 now. I'm an old fart. Anyways, I remember he was holding her in his arms, and she was a tiny little bean baby, that was it. And he looked up at me with tears in his eyes, and he goes, I don't matter anymore. And I'm like, no, you don't, bro. You really don't. And I think I see that with Khan, where he realizes that his eternity is Callie, right? That's his forever. Callie is his key to immortality, to his legacy, to all of those things. Whatever she becomes, she is what carries on beyond him. And that's the taste of eternity. That's the taste of paradise, truly, is that our essence does carry on. In those who we leave behind, I think is ultimately it. And regardless of what happens to Khan as an individual, his legacy now is Kali. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, because now we can play with that legacy. Now we can do something with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately is the most important part of it. And sometimes you don't live up to the legacy of those before you. And sometimes that's okay. Right? There are great, or, when I say great, I don't mean good great. I just mean great people of history whose kids are their offspring are still around, doing stuff, walking around and saying things. I think that's the point, though, is, we do kind of send a message in the bottle or release the bird. You don't matter anymore. This new person does. This new person will take over for you. And that legacy may feel a little undeserved sometimes, in good or bad ways, right? So I think also, and I guess we can kind of open this up now. Obviously, we called it Lear is Kali. Her curiosity, I think, though, is an interesting sort of thing to do, because I think when we think about those we've come from, we think about our legacy as that carry forward of those individuals from which we come. Mm-hmm. And I've done that, right? I mean, I have a complicated relationship with family members and everything like that. And the person I am versus the person they are is different at this point, but I am their legacy, like it or not. And I think that's a fascinating exploration. And I don't think I would have done it any other way.
As always, Positively Trek is brought to you by its Patreon supporters, including Joyce Mirren, Brandy Jacala, Christina DeClercq-Zalagi, John Guppy, Out of Memory, Patrick Carlin, and Ricky Long. If you'd like to support the podcast, visit patreon.com/positivelytrek. You can join at any level and enjoy early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, episode shoutouts, executive producer credits, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/positivelytrek. Thank you so much to those of you supporting us. We truly do appreciate it. And now, back to the show. Back on Ceti Alpha V, we were saying the ship launches. Mm-hmm. Khan makes it out, gets back to the camp, basically, and asks, like, have you made contact yet? Have they cleared the atmosphere? And we get the report that we saw an explosion in the sky, we saw something flaming fall, and they cannot contact the Venture. So Khan comes to the conclusion that that ship's been destroyed, and I loved, again, the sound design of this, of him just going full Khan on the radio and smashing it to pieces. And of course, this being the big tragedy that, they fuel pod ruptured, so they ejected it. That's what fell. The radio was out, but they managed to repair it. And after a few minutes, if they just waited a few more minutes, they would have made contact. But this is an interesting inflection point, that this is kind of where all of that potential that we saw there was just lost, thrown in the dust winds of Ceti Alpha V, I guess. And Khan is now on the path to becoming what we see in the Wrath of Khan. Yeah, like you said, Dr. Lear is Kali Noonien Singh, and now we've discovered that her journey through this has basically been, she remembers things differently than what history says, that Khan is a genocidal madman and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I know better than that. I'm going to prove it. She goes to Ceti Alpha V, does this research, and basically finds out, no, history is right. He is a horrible person. And that's kind of where she's at in her mind when she talks about it with Tuvok. Tuvok's perspective, I think, is really interesting on this.
Yeah, he called it, right? Mm-hmm. Level 9 scans and,
Yeah, what did he say? Is like, when did you figure it out? A fraction of a second after I discovered there was no wreckage on it. So yeah. I like that they kind of hung a lantern on it, that like, he's like, you are Kali Noonien Singh. And she could like protest. There could be like a big gasp moment, but no, her answer is like, when'd you figure it out? I like that.
Yeah, I think it's that, I also think that Khan's response is another little tiny lesson here, and that is the concept of patience. Mm-hmm. And the impatient will always screw up and be kind of the architects of their own disaster. Like I think of Romeo and Juliet, right? Moments after realizing everything is good, they if they just would have waited like another 2.5 minutes after, ending it for the two of them, it's just like it's on but a hair's tooth, or whatever word we would use for it. I'm mixing my analogies. Had he have waited a minute and just taken a breath, that would have been it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the greatest lessons of this episode, and one of the greatest lessons of life, is if you can just take a breath in those moments, so much more can open up for you, and so much more can be possible if you just show that little mote of patience. Mm-hmm. And that's what Lear/Kali says, like, if only he had this, if only. And I'm like, I'm with you, doctor. We're all saying that, but that's how tragedy works, right? Is tragedy is lamenting the missed opportunity. It's lamenting what could have been had we have just kept our better senses just that much longer.
Yeah. And like, how keeping in with Khan's character is that though too, right? Like, I love that. Like, I think of Wrath of Khan as well, and Kirk played right into this, right? When they're first entering the Mutara Nebula and the Reliant is coming behind them and it starts slowing down. Yeah. And Kirk says, "Put me on." And he says, and Khan at this point thinks Kirk is marooned back on Regula. And he's like, "We tried it once your way, Khan. You game for a rematch." And he's just like, "What?"
Yeah.
Full impulse power, and just blasts after him. It's like,
yeah,
there you go. At least he's predictable.
Well, and that's it, is when you're dealing with the impatient, you can very much control the situation. And I mean, even in loss, right? Khan's gonna, for all intents and purposes, Ceti Alpha V would have been his graveyard, right? No matter what. But he could have kept in contact with his daughter, regardless of if they were ever able to get help or whatever, right? Taking that extra second would have meant all the difference, and he didn't. And I think that's ultimately leads to the downfall. And you think about, like, had we have taken that second in a number of other instances and circumstances, had the Challenger just taken another second to check the O-rings, like, it's all of these things, like that's how tragedy works. And if you don't learn from it, then you're going to screw up in the same way in another circumstance. And I think learning patience is probably one of the most adult things we can do. Now, I'm not saying patience for patience sake. Sometimes action is important, and taking the initiative is different from being patient, because oftentimes I find that patience reveals initiative. And so for that, we have to look at things that way. If I'm making any sense.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of fridge magneting at this point, patience reveals initiative, let's set that up on the...
Yeah. No, it's a good one though, for sure. And it's exemplified in the actions of Khan here. And ultimately, I think that's what I love about this series is, by the end here, we're talking about character motivations and different forces at work in character rather than big swings of plot, like I love that it really, even though lots of, events do happen and there is plot happening, ultimately it's down to these characters, and it really is an exploration of what motivates these people and how do they work. And from Khan just being this irrational person, but like seeing what gets him there, right? And that the seeds of another future were there, but we can't have that, right? Also, it occurs to me that, like, yeah, this is all building towards Wrath of Khan, but Khan and his people are still on that planet for another decade after this. Like, that is horrible to contemplate. And Khan stewing in that sense of loss from that moment on. Like, can you imagine what that 10 years was like for him and the people around him?
It explains why that's another way to turn yourself into an Ivan-like character. Yeah. Right? Is if all you can do is stew in your loss, in your failure, in those things, and not come up with something else to live for, then you're gonna find things to die for, I guess. And revenge on Kirk was more worth than anything. Joachim's right. Like, we've got a ship, Khan, we can go and we could regroup, we could build ourselves up in a much more less hostile environment,
find an actual paradise to rule.
And then take on Kirk, right? Like, let's take our time and do this the right way and stuff like that. And I guess, like, despite the rampant war crimes of this character in history, Tokugawa Ieyasu, the guy who becomes the permanent shogun of feudal Japan afterward, when you actually look into how he was able to work, he was hostage for several years. His son betrayed him. There were moments where it was on a knife's edge that he was going to get wasted, but his patience paid off, and then his dynasty lasted for 300 years. And so I do think that, like, if you are patient and can take that extra time, you're going to make it. And that's it's a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional thinking. You're not thinking outside of what's directly around you. You're not seeing the forest for the tree, using, I think it was Ursula's little point there. Yeah, no. And I like that Kali sees that in her father. And I think that maybe in that respect, that's maybe the best thing that she's learned from him. There's so much you could learn from Khan, but I think that's the best one, is sometimes those who brought you here, you learn best by learning to not do what they did, or how not to act by how they acted.
So Tuvok now knows this secret, but he's not going to tell, which was interesting. I think that's kind of a cool little turn. But he's going to continue to advocate for the rights of the genetically altered, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting little bit to his character there. But
is that why he leaves Starfleet?
I don't know. They didn't really get into that, I guess, all that much. But
I really do actually like that sort of obliquely Tuvok gets a lot more depth out of all of this. Mm-hmm. And, watching him in the older Treks and now, in Voyager and stuff, and knowing that he carries this story with him is an interesting parallel. And I think it's a credit to his character. Voyager, in all honesty, isn't my favorite Star Trek. I mean, I don't hate it by any stretch. It's quite lovely. I enjoy it. There's a few clunky episodes, but in any TV series, you're going to get a couple clunkers, right? But I've always really liked Tuvok. But no, this really, really brought him a whole lot more depth and characterization that I really do appreciate. And yeah, he shows an ability to kind of, sometimes doing the right thing is not following the rules, right? And we have to be aware of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think this is a kind of a good time to pivot to our final thoughts on the entirety of the Star Trek Con series. So there's kind of two main questions I want to ask. And the first one is a little bit broad, but was it worth it? Was it worth this series being made? Was this a story worthy of being told? What are your thoughts on that?
This was amazing. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's a brand new medium for me in Star Trek. Audiobooks notwithstanding, this is different, right? This is an audio play, right? Like we've talked about sound engineering, we've waxed lyrical about it the whole way through. I think this is a very affordable way that we can see some new Star Trek without having to break the bank, and we can focus a lot more on story and writing. And when it comes to story and writing, though there are pieces in this that, you and I have said they're like, it's fine. I would give this, probably some of the best Trek I have ingested in a long time. And what I really liked is ending it with Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Kubla Khan, right? We have Lear / Kali and Khan reciting the last bits of Coleridge's Kubla Khan, and what it is Kubla Khan is about a glimpse of Eden, right? It's a glimpse of that perfection, but understanding that ultimately it's not real. By envisioning Eden, you kind of envision nowhere, because the reality is always going to be different from what you perceive it to be. And there is no perfect moment. There is going to be no, okay, and now we're all right? Khan says that, right? It's never over. It really isn't. And I think that's something that we need to understand very much, that if you're seeking some level of perfection where everything will just be all right again, you're going to be chasing a mirage for the rest of your life. And I think some of the great leaders of this world have brought that up, in the sense that contradiction, when you resolve a contradiction, something else comes along, right? They arrive on Ceti Alpha V and they encounter, just the difficulties of the environment. Then they encounter the difficulties of the eels. They encounter, things keep happening, right? And I think that's maybe what life is actually about. It's not about trying to chase some kind of Eden. And I think people like Ivan, in their hate, think that they can come to these easy solutions by eliminating something, but actually that's not the case, and you're always going to fall into having to destroy something else. And I mean, that's ultimately what Khan was about too. So maybe I'll finish off at the end of the Cuban Revolution. in Santa Clara, and this is might be apocryphal, I don't know for sure, but apparently one of the revolutionary fighters ran up to Che Guevara when this was all over. They defeated Batista. It's 1959. Everything looks great now, right? Cuba's free, blah, blah, blah. And one of the soldiers runs up to Che and says, Commandante, the revolution's over. Can I go back home? And Che spins on him and says, you fool. The revolution isn't over. It's just begun, right? And I think that's it, is they didn't see perfection. They still haven't seen perfection. They're still struggling, but so are we all. And I think that's it, is thinking that you can get to some perfect utopia. You're chasing a mirage, and understanding that what really matters is your patience, is the people you have with you. Being smart about that is how you're going to get through it. Emotional maturity, that sort of stuff. So yeah, this was very worth it to me, because it opens up this kind of greater conversation that I think is actually really worth having, especially now.
I also think it was worth it. I think it adds some really interesting stuff to the Star Trek universe. I love, for example, the amount that it fleshed out the character of Marla McGivers, who was somebody who I think was an interesting plot motivator in Space Seed, but ultimately didn't have a ton of agency in that episode. And I think, Ren Schmidt brings a really great voice to her, and I loved her performance. Naveen Andrews, I think, might be almost the best Khan. Like he's right up there, I think, with Ricardo Montalban as far as Khans go for me. Now, I mean, the only other two, of course, were Benedict Cumberbatch, who is a great actor whom I very much admire, but was not cast correctly as Khan.
No, he was shoehorned in.
Yeah. And of course, a kid who has a couple lines in an episode who, did great for a young kid Khan, I guess. But
sure.
But Naveen Andrews, I think, really steps up to the role. And that's a challenging role. Like Ricardo Montalban and his pontificating on screen, like, how do you got to watch that and go like, good Lord, like, how do I? And he did an incredible job. Naveen Andrews.
Full agreement.
Absolutely killed it. So yeah, I guess my second question with regards to the final thoughts on the series as a whole is, how do you feel this will affect our future watches of both the TOS episode Space Seed and, of course, in probably a bigger manner, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan?
Well, I want to do that. I want to do that. I wouldn't mind getting on camera, I guess on audio, and laying out the invite and saying, so when are you and I going to watch The Wrath of Khan, Dan? Like, I would love to get together and see the show and maybe kind of pontificate on how this changes our watch, because I have intentionally not watched The Wrath of Khan, to get to this point, and I want to sort of see that culmination, because I haven't watched it with this new information. And I like that, because I think we fall into nostalgia so easily in the franchises that we watch and stuff like that. And I think that's a problem. But I think what something like this does is it doesn't necessarily rely on nostalgia more than it says, here's a movie that you've been familiar with, and that, in the case of you and me, I believe it's older than both of us.
By a few months.
There you go. So, yeah. So this movie that's as old as us, that we've seen, I mean, I can't count how many times I've watched The Wrath of Khan, but getting to watch it with some new eyes, with some new perspectives, I think is really enjoyable, and I look forward to that, and I'm excited about it. Mm-hmm. I'm rewatching the Star Wars, the originals, 1977, 80, and 83 Star Wars trilogy with two friends who have never seen any Star Wars.
That's exciting.
And they just watched The Empire Strikes Back last night, and they were really blown away by the twist.
I bet.
They were like, what? And I'm like, I know, right? But I think that's it, is having watched the Star Wars prequels, as flawed as they are, you watch those you watch the original OG trilogy with some new eyes-ish to some degree, right? Like Vader's obsession with Obi-Wan's a little more fleshed out and understood. And so I think we can do that. And it's a nice way to reapproach the shows we love and yeah, I don't know how it'll affect Space Steed other than I just want to watch Marla MacGyver's a little more closely because she was such a compelling character in this, and her death also really sucked. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I think it will affect our future watches, and I hope it does, and I'd like to talk about it with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick thing with Star Wars. So have you heard of Hatchet Order for watching the Star Wars films? So apparently episode 4 and 5, so A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, once you get that revelation about, the big revelation in that movie, just in case there's somebody. Anyway, then you go back and watch episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then Return of the Jedi. And it's actually an interesting little narrative arc that, because now you know the relationships, then you go back and get the backstory. And then you get and bonus, if you're watching, the remastered old trilogy, Hayden Christensen showing up at the end of Return of the Jedi actually makes a little bit of sense. It doesn't otherwise.
I'm actually gonna float that idea and see if they want to do it that way.
Yeah.
Hatchet Order. Why did they call it Hatchet Order?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I'm thinking of like Gary Paulson's novel about that kid who gets lost in the woods of Ontario, but
ooh, yeah. No, I don't know. I'm assuming because you're chopping it up, maybe. I don't know. I actually don't know where that name comes from. Star Wars fan listening will probably be able to tell us exactly why that.
Help us, Star Wars fan. You're our only hope.
I get that reference.
Me too. Anyways, enough about Star Wars.
So yeah, final thoughts. My final thoughts with regards to Space Seed and Wrath of Khan. Absolutely agree. The Space Seed, the Marla MacGyver's angle is really what I want to pay attention to this time around, and kind of play her with that more agency having voice in my head, and understand her motivations a little better as she kind of outlines them to Khan later on. And then, yeah, Wrath of Khan. Just knowing more about what informs that character. And I mean, of course, retconning what informs that character, but still, like, it's a part of the universe. Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how that plays out and how I see that movie differently now.
No, full agreement. And obviously getting to do that is great because, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan is one of my favorite Trek movies. So, here's to the journey.
Absolutely. Well, final thing that I want to talk about is, let me put it this way. Some of you may have noticed in our discussions of all 9 of these Khan episodes, there's one word I've been avoiding using this whole time, and that is the C word. Canon. I've not brought it up. We've been very careful not to talk about it because I think these stories deserve to be talked about in a way that doesn't necessarily gauge its value to the universe or anything like that. Like, I didn't kind of want to get into that. But a recent article on trekmovie.com has been talking about an interview with David Mack, Kirsten Beyer, kind of their thoughts on the canonicity of Star Trek Khan. So there's an earlier interview where Kirsten Beyer had basically said, I don't know what the status of it is. I need to talk to some people, and left it at that. But now she's come back with, and this is her exact quote. So, okay, here's what I can tell you, because I've had a few conversations. There is nobody who comes along and waves a scepter and dubs a thing canon. What I can tell you is that for people currently working on Star Trek Khan will be treated as canon, meaning it will not be overwritten, contradicted, and it will be, when possible, incorporated into future storytelling. So I think that's our answer. It's as canon as anything that is not a TV show or movie can be, I think.
I also get a little bit cagey around the conversation of canon over a good story. And in your and my discussions, I think we've got a radio play in our heads that we could even offer up. Is it perfectly going to fall into all of the canon? I don't care very much. And I think that's it is if we think about how mythology works and human mythology, we do change the story from time to time about the myths that we tell, right? And sometimes we redo stuff. Sometimes we review things. Sometimes we have to go back and correct where the story has kind of gone off the rails a little bit. And that happens in the story of humanity, right? Where, you think about some of the great religions, right? Like how they branch off of each other and kind of see things from other perspectives and angles. I mean, this isn't anything new. And I think our obsession with Canon in a franchise that was originally designed to sell color televisions is perhaps maybe a little much.
Not seeing the forest for the trees, maybe?
Yeah, right. The Technicolor trees. So I'm glad this has happened. Like I am a little bit happier in that respect, but honestly, I want a good Star Trek story and I'll take it. Yeah. Right. Had they have made Kirk a villain in this story and looked at it that way, sure, go for it.
Yeah.
Why are we so obsessed with this like no takesies backsies culture in Star Trek? Like, yeah. I don't know. I don't like what they did with the Titan. I liked its original look, with the kind of the down-shaped pylons and the swept design, the new design. I like that type of ship. I just don't like that they had to completely flip it around and do all that stuff with it. Why? What's the point? And now it's canon. Well, whatever. I don't care. I still like the old design, and I have a model that I'm looking at right now of the old design, and that just stays in my head. And that Titan still flies around in space in my head. And I think that's the point. Sorry, now I'm on a rant. See, look what you made me do. I'm happy it's canon. Great. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep making these radio shows, because I think we have just unlocked a new potential. We have found another frontier, and we can go down it. And those of us who have a lot of time on the highway, those of us who like to listen to podcasts while we're folding laundry and doing dishes, if I can hear a Star Trek story while I'm doing that, like, come on. Of course I want that. Great. Yeah. Especially if they're going to have sound engineering at this caliber. Like, please give me more. Hook it to my veins. This makes me very, very happy.
Absolutely.
So yeah, keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Yeah. So my last word on canon, and this is kind of, I've said this before, and it echoes a lot of what you're saying, is like, we as fans shouldn't necessarily care what is canon. The only people that should worry about canon, and I like that this article addresses this, is the people who make Star Trek. The people who make Star Trek have to worry about what's canon and what they're going to use and not use in their stories. We as fans, we're free to enjoy this however we want. And I don't necessarily like the term headcanon, because just get that word right out of there. Head continuity, whatever you want to call it. Like,
brain story.
Yeah. Like, there are novels, Star Trek novels I've read that in my mind, that absolutely happened. I love that novel. Sure. Now, will a story come along that contradicts it? Probably. And in that case, like, maybe I readjust how I think of things. Maybe I don't. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the people making it, what assumptions they're going to use going forward. And I like that this series in that respect, on that level, I like that this series is getting that respect by the people making Star Trek. That's cool. That's awesome. If you enjoy it, put it in your personal continuity. If you don't enjoy it, you don't have to, whatever. Maybe you really liked the Greg Cox novel that covered these events, Terrain in Hell, I think it's called. Maybe you liked the IDW comics that covered these events, and that's in your personal continuity. That's fine too. That said, if like some future script somewhere mentions Khan and his number one lieutenant Ivan at the Battle of whatever on Earth, I'll be like, that's cool.
Yeah. Go for it.
Neat. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the last thing to talk about, of course, from this article is something you alluded to. More of this, please. Basically, like everything else, it sounds like, how did this one do? Did it get the ears on it that it needed? Kirsten Beyer does say there's an appetite for more from the people who made it. This was great, and we know how to do this, but beyond that, she doesn't know what the future is right now. Her desire, apparently, is to do a more completely original story that could carry forward without necessarily being set. You know, it's only going to be one season or something like that. Yeah, give us a whole new original cast of some corner of the Star Trek universe that becomes an ongoing series. Like, sure. Hook it up directly to my veins, as you say. Although preferably my ears. I think that would be more useful.
You can hear better through your ears.
Yeah, I've heard. I've heard that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, like this opens up some potential of like, let's do a radio show where it's a crew on a Daedalus class. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Way back in the day. Go for it. Have some fun.
What was that serial novel that Pocket Books put out years and years ago? I think it was Starfleet Year One, and it was set mostly aboard a Daedalus class ship.
There you go.
I think it's been completely contradicted by Enterprise. Speaking of canon, but still, like, cool. Like, let's do something like that.
Yeah.
What a journey. What a 9-episode audio journey this has been. Barry, thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. This has been a really fun discussion, and boy, I hope we're talking about more of these in the future.
I certainly hope so too, Dan. And yeah, this has been loads of fun. We'd love to hear what you guys think about it and how you feel. Feel free to check us out on our social medias and have some chitter chatter there. That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. positivelytrek@gmail.com if you'd like to email us directly. And of course, our Positively Trek discussion group on Facebook. We're also on Blue Sky, and I guess that's about it. We're also on Instagram, but I haven't done anything with it for a long time.
Fair enough.
I should probably do something. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us this week. We'll see you again in an episode soon. Until then, as always, stay positive. Positively Trek is produced and edited by me, Dan Gunther, and co-produced by Barry DeFord on Treaty 8 territory, the home of the Beaver, Cree, Dene, and Métis people, whose histories, languages, and cultures we respect. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations.
See you